We are on Canto 3, Chapter 16, Text 6. Is that correct? Yasyamritamalaya Shravana Vagaha Yasyamritamalaya Shravana Vagaha Sadya Punati Jagad Asvapachad Vikuntaha Sadya Punati Jagad Ashvapachad Vikuntaha Soham Bhavabhya Upalabdha Sutirtha Kirtish Soham Bhavabhya Upalabdha Sukirtha Kirtis Chindyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim Chindyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim Yasyamrita malayasha shravanavagaha Sadya punati jagad asvapachad vikuntaha Soham bhavadbhya upalabdha sutirtha kirtis Chindyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim Yasyamritamala shravanavagaha Sadya punati jagadashvapachad vikuntaha Soham bhavabhya upalabdha sutirtha kirtish Chindyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim Yasyamrtamala shravanavagaha Sadya punati jagadasvapachad vikuntaha Soham bhavabhya upalabdha sutita kirtish Chindyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim Yasyamrtava yashaya sabranavagaha Sadya punati jagadashvapachad vikuntaha Soham bhavabhya upalabdha sutita kirtis Chindyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim Yasyamritamala yasha shravanavagaha Sadhya punati jagadashvapachad vikuntaha Soham bhavabhya upalabdha sutirtha kirtish Chindyam svabhahum apiva pratikula vrittim. Vaishnavis. Yasyamritam yagnavagaha sadya punati jagadashva pachad vikuntaha sohang bhavabhya upalabdha sutita kitish Jindhyam svabahum apiva pratikula vrittim yasya of whom? Amrita, nectar. Amala, uncontaminated. Yashaha, glories. Shravana, hearing. Avagaha, entering into. Sadhya, immediately. Punati, purifies. Jagat, the universe. Ashvapachat, including even the dog eaters. Vaikuntaha, without anxiety. Saha, that person. Aham, I am. Bhavabhyaha, the fame. I'm from you. Upalabdha, obtained. Sutirtha, the best place of pilgrimage. Kirtihi, the fame. Chindyam, would cut off. Swabhahum, my own arm. Api, even. Vaha, toward you. Pratikula vrittim, acting inimically. So, the translation reads, anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear, the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. So we can recite collectively. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear, the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. So here is the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Real purification can take place in human society if its members take to Krishna consciousness. This is clearly stated in all Vedic literature. Anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness in all sincerity, even if he is not very advanced in good behavior, is purified. A devotee can be recruited from any section of human society, although it is not expected that everyone in all segments of society is well behaved. As stated in this verse, and in many places in Bhagavad Gita, even if one is not born in a Brahmana family, or even if he is born in a family of Chandalas, if he simply takes to Krishna consciousness, he is immediately purified. In the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, verses 30 through 32, it is clearly stated that even though a man is not well behaved, if he simply takes to Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be a saintly person. As long as a person is in this material world, he has two different relationships in his dealings with others. One relationship pertains to the body, and the other pertains to the spirit. As far as bodily affairs or social activities are concerned, although a person is purified on the spiritual platform, it is sometimes seen that he acts in terms of his bodily relationships. If a devotee in the activities, if a devotee born in the family of a Chandala, lowest caste, is sometimes found engaged in his habitual activities, he is not to be considered a Chandala. In other words, a Vaishnava should not be evaluated in terms of his body. The Shastra states that no one should think of the deity in the temple as made of wood or stone. No one should think that a person coming from a lower caste family who has taken to Krishna consciousness is still of the same low caste. These attitudes are forbidden, because anyone who is engaged in the process of purification, if he sticks to the principle of Krishna consciousness, he will very soon be fully purified. The conclusion is that if one takes to Krishna consciousness in all seriousness, he is to be understood as already purified, and Krishna is ready to give him protection by all means. The Lord assures herein that he is ready to give protection to his devotee, even if there is a need to cut off a part of his own body. Yasyamritamala shravanavagaha sadhya punati jagadasvapachad vikuntha soham bhavabhya upalabdha sukirta kirtis chinyam sabahum apiva pratikula vrittim. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of a dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore I will not hesitate to lop off my arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. This is a very interesting segment of Srimad Bhagavatam. The four Kumaras have just cursed Jai and Vijay, and Jai and Vijay have become very afraid. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has shown up. When the Supreme Lord immediately appeared, the four Kumaras naturally offered prayers to him. They had not previously ever encountered the direct form of the Supreme. Previously, they had been simply followers of the Brahman, or the impersonal feature of God. That's what they were accustomed to. Though from their father, Brahma, they had heard that there was a personal feature. So they had sojourned to Vaikuntha just to see that form. And of course, when they were prevented, they became angry and cursed the two doorkeepers, and the Supreme Lord arrived. And after offering some prayers, the four Kumaras now are being told a little bit about the Supreme Lord here. So anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of a dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. So this chapter 16, from 1 to 12, the Supreme Lord replies to the four Kumaras. So the Supreme Lord is explaining himself to the four Kumaras here. And the Supreme Lord is replying to the four Kumaras, expressing his love for his devotees. So just as the devotees try to gradually purify themselves to the stage where they feel great love and desire to serve the Supreme Lord, similarly, the Supreme Lord reciprocates that desire. He also wants to serve his devotees very thoroughly, very with even more love than they try to serve him. So, okay, that's 1 to 12. the Supreme Lord replies to the four Kumaras and expresses his love for his devotees. 13 through 25 is the four Kumaras remain submissive. 26 through 34 is the age-old musical question, who is really at fault? The four Kumaras for cursing Jai and Vijay, or Jai and Vijay for blocking the four Kumaras. That's 26 through 34. So stay tuned for the exciting revelation of the answer to that question. And then the last three verses, 35 through 37, Brahma's concluding words to the demigods. All right. So some interesting ideas here. Purification takes place by the process of Krishna consciousness. That's what we know. Sarvo padi vinirmuktam tat paradena nirmalam hrishikesha hrishikenem sevanam bhaktir uchyate. That simply by executing devotional service, one can rise above all the upadhis. So what is an upadhi? An upadhi is a designation. When you travel by air, you go and you pay your ticket, and the happy people behind the counter of the air line, they put stickers on your suitcases. And the sticker usually describes where you are now and where you are going to go. So in a similar way, when we come out of the womb, we have stickers on our body. Where we were, where we are now, where we're going to go. And so these are designations. We are not the body, and we are not our designation. We are not our race, our gender, our place of birth, our ethnicity. We are not old or young. We are simply spirit soul. However, due to the way material nature works, we are convinced by society and over our life in the world that we are this body. Others relate to us as the body, and we relate back to them as their bodies. And Krishna consciousness is the gradual process of giving up this false conception. But it dies hard. Very hard to give up this misconception. It only comes when we become progressively more and more pure, where we can actually see everyone beyond the bodily platform, that we are not these bodies, never were, never will be. Death will prove it to us, because we'll be cast out of the body. And by hearing the name, form, reputation, philosophy of the Supreme Lord, we will be able to recognize that we are not the body. So we see a gradual progression, and what I wanted to talk about today, so I'll get right to it because time really flies, especially when we do Dhammadarastakam. So in the Madhurya Kadambini, it describes this process of gradual purification. And we find out that there is something we call anarthas, of which there are 4 categories. These anarthas, what is an anartha? It's an unwanted thing. Put more maybe succinctly in English, an anartha is a desire that you don't want. It's an unwanted want, which is interesting, actually, that we can want things that we don't want. So we have desires, but we can abstractly look at those desires and think, I wish I didn't have that desire. So we have a desire, and at the same time, concomitantly, we have the desire to want to be rid of that desire. So anarthas are unwanted desires, and they come in 4 types, which are described in the Madhurya Kadambini. And the first type is called Duskritotha, which means desires that come as a result of sins that we've committed in the past. When a person engages in unwanted sinful action, one of the punishments of the unwanted sinful action is we get the desire to perform that sin again And this is the process of why we get addicted to so many bad habits. It's not just heroin or, really big, horrible things like that. But so many different kinds of sinful behavior, we become habituated and we can't stop them. And we see the tendency to want to do that same wrong thing again. This is an anartha. And in particular, this is in the classification known as Duskritotha, or unwanted desires due to past sin. There is Sukritottha, which is unwanted desires that come to us as a result of our past pious actions. So we may have wanted to go to the heavenly planets, we may have wanted to be rich, we may have wanted to have a lot of people looking up to us in the category of fame and reputation, etc., etc. And so we may have done material things, or may have done even various Vedic formulas to try to achieve these ends. And so we have desires now based on these material wants. And these are an impediment. So we have desires that are coming as a result of sin we've done in the past, desires we've come as a result of the pious things that we want and have done in the past. Third category of unwanted desires is Aparadhottha. So these are, Aparadhottha are sinful desires that come to us as a result of offenses. So this is particularly relevant here because we're talking about the offenses that the four Kumaras have made, and the fact that they made offenses, and they're now, not the four Kumaras, but the Jai and Vijay, the fact that they offended the four Kumaras, now they're getting a result from that. So we have a tendency to also repeat offenses. We were talking about the other day whether offenses and sins are the same thing or not. It appears, at least according to the Madhurya Kadambini, that they're treated separately, even though to some extent they seem quite similar, but apparently to some extent they're also treated separately here in the Madhurya Kadambini. So due to offenses, we start up different desires, just like by performing a sin we get the desire to do it again. By performing an offense we get the desire to do it again. Now, there's a fourth category of anartha, and that is Bhaktyuttha, which are unwanted desires that come from bhakti, which is interesting. This is described in the Madhurya Kadambini. So what is that exactly? Near as I can make it out, desires that come from bhakti are, they are mentioned actually in the Madhurya Kadambini as well, that as a person gradually becomes more and more practiced in the process of bhakti yoga, one may develop a reputation as a devotee, and therefore people may give them money and facility and various kinds of deference, and as a result a person may become attached to those things that others give them, and these are the various unwanted desires that are given birth by performing the practice of bhakti. So there are these four categories of unwanted things: Duskritotha, Sukritottha, Aparadhottha, and Bhaktyuttha. So material desires that are generated as a result of sins we've committed, material desires generated as a result of our pious activity in the past, material desires that are generated from the offenses we've committed, and finally material desires that are generated by bhakti itself. And these are not gotten rid of in the same way, in the same sort of schedule. So in Madhurya Kadambini, it gives us 5 categories of purification. And these 5 categories start with Bahu-Desa-Varttini, which means that something is a little bit cleansed. It's been partially cleansed, Bahu-Desa-Varttini. Then there's, Eka-Desa-Varttini, which is just partially cleansed. Then Bahu-Desa-Varttini, which means it's substantially cleansed. And then we have Prayiki, which means it's almost completely cleansed. And then we have Purna, which is fully cleansed. And finally we have Atyantiki, which is too much of cleansed. No, actually, it means absolutely cleansed. So there are these 5 stages. So we see that unwanted things are not all gotten rid of at the same time. We have one of the stages of the 9 stages of devotional purification. It's called Anartha-Nivritti. So we're talking about anarthas, and nivritti means to have them destroyed. But we see that not all types of anarthas are destroyed with the onset of Anartha-Nivritti. Some go on beyond the Anartha-Nivritti stage. And then in the Madhurya Kadambini, we discover that of them all, Aparadhottha, or offenses due to aparads, are the stickiest ones that are the last to go. So it mentions that at Bhajana-Kriya, these aparad offense, or these desires born from aparad, are Eka-Desa-Varttini. And at Nistha, they are Bahu-Desa-Varttini, or they're substantially cleansed. At Ruci, they are Purna, or rather, they are Prayiki. They are almost completely cleansed. And finally, at when the Supreme Lord reveals himself to the devotee, are they absolutely cleansed. So even at Prema, they are only Purna. They are only fully cleansed. Only when you actually meet the Supreme Lord are all material desires due to offensive mentality completely removed. Now, we can, compare that to Duskritotha, or unwanted things unwanted desires that are generated by sinful action. So already at Bhajana-Kriya, they are Prayiki. So at Bhajana-Kriya, they are, almost completely cleansed. And at Atasaktis, they are Atyantiki, absolutely cleansed. So they come and go pretty fast. And by the time you get to Atasaktis, at that stage, there are no material unwanted desires remaining from past sins. Now, when we talk about Bhaktyuttha, what about them? So we find that again, at Bhajana-Kriya, they are, we begin to cleanse them, in other words, Eka-Desa-Varttini, and at Ruci, they are Atyantiki. So it doesn't give us a schedule of how it works with Sukritottha. So, but at any rate, we can see that the most sticky ones, the ones that last the longest, the ones that are hardest to get rid of, are the unwanted desires that come as a result of the offenses that we make. So those will be the battles that we will have all the way till the time that we meet Krishna face to face. So the other ones tend to be expunged earlier in the process of devotional service. Of course, I don't expect anyone to remember all these different categories, but I wanted to just enumerate them to kind of help myself to remember and grasp how it's laid out. But also, by understanding these things, we can see that there are different categories of unwanted things, and that purification takes place in several categories at the same time. And from these various categories, which are the hardest things to ultimately dig out of the soul and throw away, So this is how it works. And so offenses are pretty sticky. And to get free from offenses is actually a very high achievement. To make an effort to perform devotional service, we have to constantly keep in mind that we are performing devotional service and we're trying not to commit offenses. And, in some temples, they recite the 10 offenses every morning, which are listed in the Padma Puran. So it's good to remind yourself of them and then meditate on whether you are getting rid of them or not. Because as we know that it says, Bahu-Janma-Kari Yadi Shravana Kirtanam Tabutana Paya Krishna Pade Premadana. If one is infested with the 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy names, if one can chant the holy name for millions of births and not get the love of Godhead, which is the ultimate goal of this chanting. So if we embrace the offenses, even with the process of chanting the holy name, it will slow down our progress in being purified by the holy name. So in the Harinam Chintamani it mentions that the sun is brilliant, and where is the question of a little cloud on planet Earth blocking out the sun? But if that cloud happens to be between us and the sun, it can block out the sun for us, not that it blocks out the sun. So in a similar way, by engaging in making these various 10 offenses, we slow down the process of Krishna consciousness. So it behooves us to try to meditate on if and how we're making these various offenses and to gradually remove them from our lives. And as we do, the holy name will much more rapidly have an effect on our heart. So in the beginning, we may not know that there are 10 offenses, but once we learn that there are 10 offenses, it will not be a question of whether or not we're making the 10 offenses. We will be making the 10 offenses. The question is, are we actually trying to stop doing it? And that's what makes the difference between namaparad and namabas, because namaparad means that you are in the offensive stage of chanting, and namabas means that you're in the clearing stage of chanting. So the offensive stage means that you're making offenses against the holy name, and you just don't care, or you're spacing out. Whereas namabas means we are still making offenses, but we know that they're offenses and we're trying to stop. So that's the thing that differentiates those two. So we recognize that if someone is engaged in devotional service, they are in the hospital, as we say. So if we go into the hospital ward and we look at the beds and we say, oh, there's somebody who's got a disease, get them out of here. how practical is that, So we can recognize that it's the same thing in devotional service, in any kind of congregation of devotees. We will see that there are still remnants of the disease. And when Prabhupada was once asked, how many pure devotees are there in ISKCON? Prabhupada asked the devotee, well, how many devotees are there in ISKCON? So as Prabhupada mentions in this very purport right here, that if one is sincerely following the process of Krishna consciousness, one may be considered to be a pure devotee. Kind of a pure devotee in potential. So if a person is a true pure devotee, their heart is completely melted to Krishna. They always do the right thing because there's no desire in them that would make them do the wrong thing. It's just not there, Now, if we instead contrast our own selves, we see that it ain't quite like that yet. So what we do realize is that we are trying to do the right thing because we know what the right thing is, and we're trying to do that even though we don't naturally feel it. And if we did what we felt like doing, it wouldn't be anything like that. It would be something quite different, So we are trying to bend our actions. But as we progress in devotional service, we're bending less and less. And as we understand in Bhagavad Gita that we reach the stage of achieving a higher taste, which is, as we were just talking about, the Ruci platform. So if one gives up material desires, by achieving a higher taste, one becomes fixed. So one can refrain from material actions and material sense gratification, but one still wants to do them. However, there eventually comes a point where one doesn't want to do material desires. One sees possibility of doing a material thing, a sense gratification, activity, or offending somebody, or getting some wonderful benediction, but one is honestly not attracted to that, as opposed to seeing one of those things and recognizing, whoa, that sounds good, but I know it's going to get me in trouble. That's a different platform. So eventually it's like that, that we get to the stage where we have ruci, or taste, where we no longer feel attracted. And this is how this process of purifying works. We purify from the platform of getting rid of our material desires, unwanted things that come as a result of sinful action, material desires that come as a result of pious action in the past, material desires that come as a result of various offenses we've committed, and finally material desires that come as a result of the bhakti that we have engaged. So this is a gradual process. And therefore, as Prabhupada mentions, that we have a character. And that character may be as a result of, from the external point of view, where we were born, our background, our ethnicity, all these things. And then we have our internal character. And that is as part of devotional service. So habits are hard to give up. And some habits aren't necessarily sinful in themselves, they're just habits, Therefore, in Harinam Chintamani it mentions that one who evaluates devotees on the basis of their birth or their caste or any of these kind of things is possessed of a hellish mentality. So we have to learn how to gradually give up this tendency and not evaluate devotees in that way, which is also what's being promoted here in this verse. So I want to give a little bit of time for questions and answers. Do we have our mic? Is it available?
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for a very sobering class. I was just thinking, I heard that you said that we kind of pure devotees. That we are kind of pure devotees, right? Like that. But of course, there are real pure devotees out there. And we know that by serving them, we can acquire their qualities. How does it exactly works? How, do you know, technical part of it?
What's that?
Technical part of it. I was just thinking, how can, just by being with someone and serving them, we can acquire their qualities. How does it work?
Yesterday, our Matunga gave a very nice class on the 26 qualities, which were discussed in yesterday's verse. I thought that was very nice, And this is actually where the rubber meets the road in religion. I was going to make this point, but I'll make it now. That why do people hate religion? Mostly because of their experience with people who practice that religion. I've had people come up to me and say, "Do you know that Jesus Christ loves you?" I say, "Well, Jesus Christ may, but it's quite obvious you don't." So I mean. There are people who, by their behavior, drive people away from religion, because they think, well, if this is what religion does for people, hey, I think I'll go with typhus or something like that instead, or, I'd rather have diphtheria. So we should also remember that it isn't just one religion. Devotees can be like this too. It's when kind of holier than thou, a sense of I'm something, you're nothing. I know everything, you know nothing. These kinds of attitudes are what push people away from religion, so we should not do that. And this is relevant because what this verse is talking about is the Supreme Lord saying that when the devotees do something that's not nice, it's a scar on him. We are representing the Supreme Lord. If people experience a bad relationship or a bad situation as a result of something we did, it reflects poorly on the Supreme. And commonly people think like this. This is not rocket science at this point, If they're treated harshly, badly, demeaningly, condescendingly by people who represent the Supreme, what are regular people supposed to think about the Supreme? So we have to keep this in mind. We should try to deal with everyone in a way that we make them think, I don't know who that person was, but I like them. Whatever they are into, I kind of would like to know something more about it, which is the way the Supreme is. So just as the Supreme Lord is indicating to the four Kumaras that Jai and Vijay, they made an offense, and therefore I consider it my offense. And so he's apologizing on behalf of the four Kumaras. And what to speak of people who have grown up in a religion and been molested as a child, or grown up in a religion and been forced to do things that they didn't want to do, or so many other things, browbeaten, chastised, denigrated, and all these kind of things. This is why religion has a bad rep, and it's hard to argue with that, but we should not make it any worse. We should try to make it better. Other questions or comments? Yeah. Wait, let's get to the end, because there are people that'll be watching this on YouTube.
For the offenses, are they as sticky if they're made in ignorance? Say if you just join and you're learning, but you don't really know anything, and then you make an offense, and then you read, and you're like, oh wow, this was totally an offense. Is it as sticky as if you did it willingly?
I haven't read anything, but personally I feel that it is not, because generally speaking, when people first start chanting the holy name, they really get a lot of immediate realization, and that's a lot of times why people just get into Krishna consciousness. But we discover that over time that feeling fades. And that's usually because we're chanting, but we're committing offenses at the same time. And by that time, we should have learned what they are, and we should have made an effort to stop doing them. So I think that's what's happening, that in the beginning, because you don't know nothing about nothing, then you're chanting, and the Supreme Lord is just happy that you have started chanting. But if you're serious about the process and you want to get somewhere in the process, then you have to learn what the 10 offenses are, to blaspheme the devotees who've dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3, disobey the orders of spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme Vedic literature pursuant to Vedic version. 5, is to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6, to give some interpretation on the Lord. 7, is to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting. 8, is to consider chanting Hare Krishna. It's one of the auspicious ritualistic activities offered in the Vedas. The fruit of activities, karma kanda. 9, instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. 10, to have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names and maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. So these are described in several places in Prabhupada's book. So they're 10, actually 11, depending on how you count, And the ones that we really should pay most attention to is probably the first one, the blaspheme devotees who have dedicated their lives for propagating the holy name of the Lord. So as we're hearing here, this is amply promoted in this part of Bhagavatam, that particular concept, that we have to try to rid ourselves of the tendency to criticize devotees harshly, If you're a manager, yes, sometimes you have to tell devotees they're doing things wrong or whatever it is, but in the long run, you still have to be respectful. Okay, so it's 5 after, and we should probably taper it off at this point. And I appreciate your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.